My beloved child, be still for one impossible moment, because what is about to reach your heart did not begin today. It began long before either of you understood why certain paths kept crossing, why certain memories refused to fade, or why an invisible thread continued pulling two lives toward the same horizon. Something extraordinary has shifted, and the silence surrounding your connection can no longer contain it. There comes a rare instant in every extraordinary journey when hidden emotions stop asking for permission. They no longer wait for perfect timing. They no longer hide behind careful words or uncertain glances. They rise like a sunrise that cannot be delayed. And when that moment finally arrived for your soulmate, something happened that even they never imagined possible. Picture this, not as a scene you are forced to believe, but as a symbol of what happens when truth grows stronger than fear. A room filled with ordinary conversations. Faces distracted by ordinary concerns. No one expecting history to change in a single heartbeat. Yet beneath the calm surface, one soul carried a feeling too powerful to remain hidden. For so long they practiced silence. They rehearsed conversations that never happened. They imagined walking away, pretending everything would become easier if they buried what they truly felt. But every attempt only made the feeling louder. Isn't it strange how the deepest truths refuse to disappear simply because someone tries to ignore them? Think carefully. What if every delay was quietly preparing one unforgettable moment instead of preventing it? That question changes everything. Because real connections do not always announce themselves with dramatic signs. Sometimes they gather strength in complete secrecy until one unexpected second becomes impossible to control. And that second finally arrived. Without planning. Without permission. Without calculation. The words escaped before fear could stop them. Not because your soulmate wanted attention. Because the heart had finally become stronger than hesitation. Imagine the silence that followed. Not an empty silence. The kind of silence that makes every person present realize they have just witnessed something completely genuine. There are moments when even strangers recognize authenticity without anyone explaining it. This was one of those moments. Some were surprised. Some smiled without understanding why. Others quietly reflected on their own lives, wondering whether they had ever been brave enough to speak from the deepest part of themselves. But the most important change did not happen around them. It happened inside your soulmate. The instant those feelings were finally spoken aloud, something heavy disappeared. The weight they had carried for so long simply dissolved. Sometimes freedom begins with a single honest sentence. And sometimes destiny begins where fear finally ends. Pause here for just a heartbeat. Can you feel how different this story already is? This is not about proving love to the world. It is about discovering that genuine emotions eventually become too powerful to remain invisible. That is why this moment matters. Because the universe often whispers before it reveals. It prepares before it unfolds. It teaches patience before it delivers clarity. Every confusing chapter had been quietly arranging this very turning point. Every unanswered question. Every unexpected delay. Every coincidence you almost ignored. None of them were meaningless. They were tiny pieces of a much larger picture that neither of you could fully see while living through it. And now, that picture is beginning to reveal itself. Still, something even more astonishing happened after those heartfelt words echoed through the air. It was not the reaction anyone expected. Not even your soulmate saw it coming. The atmosphere itself seemed different. People who had remained distant suddenly looked closer. Conversations shifted direction. Someone who had doubted everything suddenly became thoughtful. Even your soulmate felt as though an invisible door had quietly opened before them. Why? Because authentic courage creates ripples far beyond the original moment. One truthful act often awakens hidden truths inside everyone watching. Remember this carefully. The loudest declaration is not always measured by volume. It is measured by sincerity. When sincerity reaches its highest point, even ordinary moments begin carrying extraordinary meaning. Perhaps that is why your own heart has been sensing change before your mind could explain it. Perhaps you have noticed subtle signs. Unexpected peace. A strange feeling that something important is approaching. Tiny moments of hope appearing for no obvious reason. These are not answers. They are invitations. Invitations to stay awake while life quietly rearranges possibilities you never imagined. And here is the mystery that almost no one sees. The words your soulmate spoke were only the beginning. The real transformation did not happen in front of everyone. It began immediately afterward, in a place where no audience could witness what unfolded next. That unseen moment changed the direction of this story forever. Stay with this journey a little longer. Because what happened after the applause faded, after the voices grew quiet, and after everyone believed the story had ended, is where the impossible truly began. A quiet question lingers: what if the loudest moment was never the confession itself, but what happened in the silence that followed? Stay here, because this is where the story takes a turn no one could have predicted. When the room slowly returned to ordinary conversation, your soulmate did not feel victorious. They felt exposed. Not with regret, but with the strange vulnerability that only truth can create. For the first time in a long while, there was nothing left to hide. Every excuse they had once leaned on had quietly disappeared. Every carefully built wall had cracked open. And although the outside world continued moving as if nothing unusual had happened, inside them an entirely different reality had begun. They stepped away from the crowd. Not because they wanted to escape. Because they needed one uninterrupted breath to understand what had just happened. Have you ever noticed that the biggest turning points rarely announce themselves with fireworks? Sometimes they arrive wrapped inside an ordinary afternoon, disguised as a single honest sentence. Your soulmate stood there replaying every word. Not asking, why did I say it? But wondering, why did it finally become impossible not to? That question echoed through them. And with every heartbeat, another realization quietly appeared. They had never truly been running from you. They had been running from the version of themselves that believed love required certainty before courage. Now that illusion was gone. Take this moment with you. The future is rarely changed by perfect plans. It is changed by one authentic decision made despite uncertainty. As your soulmate gathered their thoughts, something unexpected unfolded nearby. Someone who had witnessed the entire scene approached them, not with criticism, not with judgment, but with surprising calm. The conversation that followed lasted only a few minutes. Yet those few minutes carried the weight of years. The person simply smiled and said, "The truth always sounds different when it finally arrives." Nothing more. No long speech. No dramatic advice. Just one simple sentence. But sometimes a single sentence arrives exactly when a soul is ready to hear it. Your soulmate remained silent. Not because they lacked words. Because those words settled into their heart like a missing piece finally finding its place. They realized something extraordinary. For so long they had believed love demanded guarantees. Now they understood that genuine connection asks only for honesty. Everything else grows from there. Pause for just another heartbeat. What if someone in your own life has been standing on the edge of honesty, waiting for the exact moment their fear becomes smaller than their hope? Perhaps more people carry silent truths than we realize. Perhaps courage is more contagious than anyone imagines. And perhaps this story is reminding you that meaningful connections often transform both people at the same time. Meanwhile, something else was happening beyond your soulmate's awareness. The energy around their life seemed lighter. Old misunderstandings that once felt permanent suddenly looked temporary. Questions that had no answers yesterday began revealing unexpected possibilities. Nothing dramatic. Nothing impossible. Just a quiet sequence of meaningful shifts that could only be recognized by someone paying close attention. That is how transformation usually begins. Not with noise. With alignment. One choice leading naturally into another. One honest moment inviting the next. If this story has stirred something inside you, perhaps leave a comment sharing the one word that best describes what you're feeling right now. And if these journeys of hope, mystery, and quiet transformation resonate with you, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring them together. Now listen carefully. There is one detail almost everyone missed. While people focused on the confession, someone else noticed something entirely different. A subtle expression. A brief glance. A reaction so small that most eyes overlooked it completely. Yet that tiny moment would soon become the key to understanding why this connection was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. Your soulmate hadn't seen it. You haven't heard about it yet. But once that hidden detail comes into the light, every moment leading up to the confession will suddenly make perfect sense. And that revelation is closer than anyone realizes. Look closer. Because the smallest moment often carries the greatest meaning. What everyone dismissed as insignificant was quietly becoming the piece that would connect every unanswered question. This is where the story begins, revealing what had been hidden in plain sight all along. Days passed. Life appeared normal again. People returned to their routines. Conversations moved on. The excitement surrounding that unforgettable confession slowly faded from everyone's attention. Everyone's. Except your soulmates. They could not stop thinking about one brief moment that happened immediately after they spoke from the heart. It wasn't the applause. It wasn't the surprised expressions. It wasn't even the courage it had taken to finally say what they felt. It was one gentle look. One silent expression that lasted only a second. Yet somehow, it stayed with them longer than every spoken word. Why? Because sometimes the eyes recognize what the mind has not yet learned to understand. Your soulmate replayed that instant again and again. The more they remembered it, the more they realized something extraordinary. For the first time in years, they had not felt alone. Not because someone promised them anything. But because something invisible had shifted inside them. Fear no longer occupied the center of their heart. Hope did. That change may sound small. It wasn't. It became the beginning of an entirely new way of seeing their future. Think about this carefully. How many opportunities disappear simply because people assume tomorrow will always look like yesterday? Your soulmate finally understood that the future is not created by repeating old fears. It is shaped by new courage. That realization gave them peace unlike anything they had experienced before. And when peace arrives, clarity quietly follows behind it. One evening, while sitting alone beneath an open sky, they found themselves smiling for no obvious reason. No message had arrived. No dramatic event had taken place. Nothing around them had changed. Yet everything within them had. Isn't that fascinating? The greatest transformations often happen where no one else can witness them. That invisible change began influencing every decision they made. Their conversations became more genuine. Their thoughts became lighter. Even the way they looked at the future carried quiet confidence instead of hesitation. It was as though they had stopped asking, "What if everything falls apart?" and started asking, "What beautiful possibility have I been too afraid to imagine?" That single question opened doors they never knew existed. Now pause for just one moment. Have you ever noticed how destiny rarely rushes? It moves with remarkable patience. It allows every lesson to arrive before the next chapter opens. That is why delays are not always obstacles. Sometimes they are preparation. Sometimes they are silent classrooms where the heart learns what the mind cannot teach. Your soulmate was beginning to understand this truth. Every delay, every misunderstanding, every unanswered moment, none of it had been wasted. Each experience had quietly prepared them to recognize something priceless when it finally appeared. And that priceless discovery was not simply love. It was the realization that genuine connection grows strongest when two people become brave enough to live authentically instead of perfectly. That understanding changed everything. Because now they no longer wanted to impress anyone. They simply wanted to be real. And strangely enough, authenticity carried a quiet power that pretending never could. Before this part comes to an end, hold on to one final thought. The confession in front of everyone was never the destination. It was only the doorway. Beyond that doorway waits a conversation that has not happened yet, a conversation where hidden fears, long-held dreams, and an unexpected promise will finally come into the light. When those words are finally spoken, both hearts will understand why every twist, every delay, and every unanswered question had been leading toward this exact moment all along. The most meaningful chapter hasn't even begun yet. Another chapter quietly opens. And this time, nothing is asking for attention. Everything is asking for understanding. Stay with this moment, because what is about to unfold was never meant to be rushed. Your soulmate finally reached the place they had avoided for so long. Not a destination on a map. A place within themselves. It was there, in complete stillness, that they admitted something they had never been brave enough to say aloud before. I was never afraid of loving them. I was afraid of becoming someone honest enough to deserve that love. The realization settled over them like the first light after a long night. It did not erase every question. But it changed the meaning of every question. Instead of wondering whether the future could work, they began wondering how they could become the person who would recognize that future when it arrived. That single shift transformed everything. The world around them looked the same. The streets had not changed. The sky had not changed. Even the rhythm of daily life remained familiar. Yet every ordinary moment now carried extraordinary meaning. They started noticing opportunities where they once noticed obstacles. They saw hope where they once expected disappointment. And most importantly, they stopped measuring the connection by time. They started measuring it by growth. Think about that for a moment. What if the greatest sign that something meaningful is unfolding is not speed, but transformation? The strongest stories are rarely the fastest. They are the ones that quietly shape two lives until both are ready to recognize what has been waiting for them all along. As these thoughts settled into your soulmate's heart, another unexpected moment arrived. Someone asked them a simple question. If you could say one final sentence to the person who changed your life, what would it be? There was no hesitation this time. No searching for perfect words. Only quiet certainty. They smiled. Not the smile of someone chasing a dream. The smile of someone who finally believed the dream was worth protecting. Softly, they answered. I hope they never doubt how deeply they inspired me to become a better version of myself. Those listening expected something dramatic. Instead, they heard something timeless. Because genuine love is not only about finding another person. It is also about discovering parts of yourself that fear had kept hidden. And perhaps that has been the quiet message beneath this entire journey. Not that extraordinary things happen to extraordinary people. But that ordinary people become extraordinary when they choose authenticity over fear. If these stories have brought a little hope, curiosity, or peace into your day, you're always welcome to share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to continue experiencing journeys like this together, subscribing simply keeps the next chapter within reach whenever you're ready. Now breathe for one more moment. Because one final mystery remains. Your soulmate has spoken from the heart. They have embraced honesty. They have released old fears. But there is still one unexpected encounter waiting just beyond the horizon. An encounter neither of you could have planned. One quiet conversation. One unforgettable smile. One moment that will reveal why every coincidence, every delay, every unexpected twist, and every silent hope has been guiding both paths toward the same destination. And when that final chapter arrives, you will realize this story was never about a single confession. It was about two hearts slowly becoming ready for a future neither could have imagined at the beginning. The final page is not turning because the story is ending. It is turning because everything that once seemed uncertain is finally becoming clear. Stay with this last moment, because sometimes the quietest endings become the strongest beginnings. Your soulmate stood at the edge of a brand new chapter. There were no grand announcements. No dramatic countdown. Only a deep sense that life had gently aligned countless invisible moments into one meaningful path. Looking back, they finally understood. The confession in front of everyone had never been about proving anything. It had been the moment they stopped hiding from their own truth. Every delay had taught patience. Every unanswered question had built wisdom. Every unexpected twist had strengthened courage. Without realizing it, they had been preparing for this transformation all along. Then something beautiful happened. Instead of chasing certainty, they embraced possibility. Instead of asking whether the future would be perfect, they simply chose to meet it with an open heart. That quiet decision changed everything. Because the future belongs to those who are willing to grow into it. Perhaps that is the hidden meaning of this entire journey. Your soulmate's courageous words were never meant to impress a crowd. They were meant to awaken something far more important. Authenticity. Hope. The confidence to stop living behind invisible walls. And maybe, just maybe, this story has awakened something inside you as well. Perhaps it reminded you that meaningful connections are not built in a single moment. They are created through countless honest choices that slowly shape two lives until they are ready to recognize one another without fear. Take this thought with you. The strongest relationships are not defined by dramatic beginnings. They are defined by two people who continue choosing honesty, kindness, and growth. Even when no one else is watching. That is where lasting connections quietly begin. If today has given you a fresh perspective, carry it into tomorrow. Let hope become stronger than hesitation. Let authenticity become louder than doubt. And whenever life places an unexpected opportunity before you, remember the lesson hidden inside this story. The heart that speaks sincerely never truly loses its voice. It simply finds the people who were always meant to hear it. Thank you for spending these moments on this journey together. If this story stayed with you, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to return for more cinematic journeys filled with mystery, hope, and meaningful discoveries, subscribing simply means we'll meet again in the next chapter. Now the story gently comes to rest. Not with an ending, but with a promise. Somewhere beyond today's horizon, two lives continue moving forward. Stronger, wiser, and more open than they were before. And perhaps the greatest surprise was never that your soulmate found the courage to speak in front of everyone. It was that one honest moment inspired both hearts to become the people they were always capable of becoming. Sometimes destiny doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with a quiet truth. A truth that changes everything. One final mystery remains. Because even after the words were spoken, even after the silence settled, life had prepared one more unexpected lesson. Not to change the ending, but to reveal why it mattered. Several weeks later, your soulmate found themselves walking through an ordinary day. Nothing seemed unusual. The world moved at its familiar pace. People hurried past without noticing one another. The wind carried quiet conversations from every direction. It looked like any other afternoon. Yet deep inside, something felt different. Not because they were waiting for a miracle. Because they had finally become someone who could recognize one. They realized that the greatest gift had never been the moment they confessed their feelings. The greatest gift was the person they had become after choosing honesty over fear. That realization brought a peace they had searched for far longer than they realized. For the first time, they no longer wondered if they had said the right words. They simply felt grateful that they had spoken from the heart. There is incredible freedom in that. When your actions reflect your deepest truth, you stop carrying the burden of, what if? You begin living in the quiet confidence of, I'm glad I was genuine. Perhaps that is the message hidden throughout this entire journey. The future is not built by perfect timing. It is built by authentic moments that slowly become unforgettable memories. Every sincere conversation. Every act of courage. Every decision to choose kindness instead of fear. These are the quiet foundations of a meaningful life. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, your soulmate smiled once more. Not because every answer had arrived, but because they finally understood that not every question needs an immediate answer. Some stories are meant to unfold one chapter at a time. Some dreams grow stronger through patience. And some connections become extraordinary precisely because they are allowed to grow naturally. If there is one thought worth carrying forward, let it be this. Never underestimate the quiet power of a truthful heart. The world may not always respond immediately. People may not always understand your intentions. But sincerity has a remarkable way of finding its destination. Sooner or later, what is real becomes visible. What is genuine becomes unforgettable. And what is meant to inspire continues echoing long after the moment has passed. So wherever your own journey leads from here, walk with courage. Speak with honesty. Choose hope whenever uncertainty appears. Because the strongest chapters of life are often written after we decide to stop hiding who we truly are. And somewhere ahead, beyond today's horizon, another remarkable story is already waiting to begin. Until then, remember this quiet truth. The most powerful voice you will ever discover is not the one that shouts the loudest. It is the one that speaks with authenticity, and changes live simply by being real. The story could have ended there, but some journeys refuse to close the moment they reveal the truth. They continue quietly, shaping lives long after the applause has faded. Listen closely, because this final reflection may be the most meaningful of all. Months passed. The extraordinary confession that once surprised everyone slowly became nothing more than a distant memory for those who had witnessed it. But for your soulmate, it remained the day everything changed. Not because people remembered what they said. Because they remembered who they became. They had discovered a simple truth that many spend a lifetime searching for. Real courage is not found in never feeling fear. It is found in choosing honesty even while fear is still present. That lesson became part of every decision they made. When uncertainty appeared, they no longer stepped backward. When new opportunities arrived, they welcomed them instead of questioning whether they deserved them. They had stopped living as someone waiting for permission. They had started living as someone guided by purpose. And that quiet transformation reached farther than they ever imagined. The people around them began changing too. Friends noticed a calm confidence. Family members sensed a new peace. Even those who barely knew them could feel that something had shifted. Not because they had become louder. Because authenticity has a way of speaking without raising its voice. Perhaps that is why this story found you today. Not to predict your future. Not to promise impossible outcomes. But to remind you that the most meaningful chapters of life begin the moment you stop hiding your genuine self. Every person carries a truth that deserves to be expressed. Every heart carries a dream waiting for courage. Every new sunrise offers another opportunity to choose growth instead of fear. Take one last pause. Imagine looking back on your own life years from now. What will matter most? The moments when you remained silent to satisfy doubt? Or the moments when you allowed sincerity to guide your steps? The answer has always been quietly waiting inside you. Your soulmate eventually realized that destiny is not a single event. It is a collection of honest choices made over time. One kind word, One brave conversation. One decision to trust hope again. Those small moments become the memories that shape an entire lifetime. So let this journey remain with you, not as a tale about one confession, but as a reminder that every meaningful connection grows strongest when built on truth, patience, and mutual growth. The chapter closes here, but its message continues. Walk forward with confidence. Protect your peace. Value authenticity. And never underestimate how one sincere moment can inspire a lifetime of transformation. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not that someone finally says, "I love you." It is that both hearts become wise enough to understand what those words truly mean. And that understanding is where every beautiful beginning quietly begins. Before you leave this journey behind, carry one final image with you. Imagine two paths that wandered through seasons of uncertainty, only to discover they had been moving toward the same horizon all along. That is where this story truly finds its meaning. Your soulmate eventually stopped asking why everything had taken so long. Instead, they began appreciating why every step had mattered. If the confession had happened earlier, they might not have understood its value. If life had been easier, they might never have discovered their own strength. If fear had never existed, courage would have remained only an idea instead of becoming a choice. That realization filled them with quiet gratitude. Not for perfection, but for growth. And perhaps that is the greatest hidden truth behind every meaningful connection. It is not built by flawless moments. It is built by two people who continue becoming better versions of themselves, even when no one is watching. One evening, as they reflected on everything that had unfolded, a peaceful thought entered their heart. What if every challenge was quietly preparing me to appreciate what was always meant for me? They didn't search for an answer. They simply smiled. Sometimes the most powerful answers are not spoken. They are lived. From that day forward, they no longer measured life by what was missing. They measured it by what had already been learned. Every lesson became a foundation. Every setback became wisdom. Every unexpected turn became proof that growth often wears the disguise of delay. Perhaps your own journey holds moments like these. Perhaps there are chapters you once wished had never happened. Yet one day, you may discover they were the very chapters that shaped your greatest strength. Life has a remarkable way of connecting moments that seem unrelated while we are living them. Only later do we see the pattern. Only later do we understand why certain doors remained closed until the right season arrived. That is why hope is never wasted. Every sincere effort, every act of patience, every decision to remain kind when life feels uncertain. These quiet choices continue creating a future that is impossible to fully see today. So let this story remain more than a memory. Let it become a reminder. Speak honestly. Listen deeply. Protect what brings peace. Encourage those you care about. And never underestimate the quiet influence of authenticity. The world changes one truthful heart at a time. As this journey gently comes to its final breath, remember this. The moment your soulmate spoke their feelings in front of everyone was unforgettable. But the greatest miracle was never the confession itself. The greatest miracle was that one honest act inspired lasting courage, deeper understanding, and a future built on trust instead of fear. That is how meaningful stories endure. Not because they end with perfect certainty, but because they leave every heart a little stronger than it was before. And perhaps, somewhere beyond this very moment, your own next chapter is already waiting, ready to be written with hope, wisdom, and the quiet confidence that your best days are still unfolding. Until our paths cross again, keep moving forward. The horizon is wider than it appears. The future is brighter than it sometimes feels. And the most beautiful chapters of life often begin just after we decide to believe in them. One last reflection remains, not because the journey needs another ending, but because some truths become clearer only after the heart has had time to breathe. Stay for this final whisper, because it may become the part you remember the longest. Long after that unforgettable day, your soulmate realized something almost no one else had noticed. The moment they stood before everyone and spoke from the heart did not change destiny. It revealed the destiny they had been quietly walking toward all along. That difference changed everything. For years, they believed life was asking them to wait. Now they understood that life had been teaching them to grow. Growth had never been the delay. Growth had been the destination. Every unanswered question had strengthened patience. Every uncertain season had expanded wisdom. Every quiet disappointment had made room for deeper appreciation. Looking back, they no longer wished any chapter had been different. Because every chapter had shaped the person capable of living the next one. Think about your own path for a moment. What if the moments you once called setbacks were actually invitations? Invitations to become calmer, kinder, braver, more aware of what truly matters. Sometimes the greatest victories arrive so quietly that they are mistaken for ordinary days. Yet those ordinary days become the memories we carry forever. Your soulmate finally understood this. They stopped searching for signs everywhere around them. Instead, they became the sign. Their kindness grew stronger. Their patience became natural. Their confidence no longer depended on anyone's approval. The love they had once struggled to express now flowed through every action, every conversation, and every choice they made. That quiet transformation inspired others without a single dramatic speech. People simply felt different around them. Hope has a remarkable way of spreading. Not through noise. Through example. Perhaps that is the hidden purpose of this entire story. Not to convince you that extraordinary moments happen only to a chosen few. But to remind you that every person carries the ability to create extraordinary meaning through ordinary acts of honesty, compassion, and courage. As this journey reaches its peaceful conclusion, carry one simple thought with you. When your heart chooses authenticity over fear. When your words reflect kindness instead of hesitation. When your actions remain true even when no one is watching. You begin creating a future that is stronger than uncertainty. And that future does not arrive all at once. It unfolds one sincere moment at a time. Thank you for sharing this journey from beginning to end. May every new chapter you step into be guided by clarity instead of confusion, hope instead of doubt, and quiet confidence instead of fear. Because the most unforgettable love stories are never remembered for a single confession. They are remembered for the lives that were transformed after the truth was finally spoken. And somewhere beyond today's horizon, a new beginning is already waiting for those who are willing to meet it with an open heart. One final echo remains. Not because this story refuses to end, but because every meaningful journey leaves behind a truth that continues long after the last word is spoken. Listen closely, because this final reflection belongs as much to your own path as it does to your soulmate's. When your soulmate looked back on everything that had unfolded, one realization stood above all the others. It was never the crowd that mattered. It was never the surprise on everyone's faces. It was never the unforgettable confession. Those moments were beautiful. But they were only the beginning. The greatest transformation happened afterward, in the quiet hours when no one was watching. That was where character replaced uncertainty. That was where hope replaced hesitation. That was where courage became a daily choice instead of a single moment. They understood something that many people spend years trying to discover. A heart becomes truly powerful not when it is admired, but when it remains authentic, even without an audience. From that day forward, they no longer chased perfect outcomes. They chose meaningful actions. They no longer worried about being understood by everyone. They simply focused on being sincere. And strangely enough, that quiet sincerity opened more doors than fear ever could. Perhaps this is why this story found you. Not to promise impossible things. Not to predict tomorrow. But to remind you that every meaningful connection begins with one decision. The decision to become the most genuine version of yourself. Life has a remarkable way of responding to authenticity. Not always immediately. Not always dramatically. But steadily. Patiently. Quietly. The seeds planted through kindness, honesty, and courage often bloom long after we have forgotten where we planted them. Never underestimate those invisible beginnings. One encouraging word can stay with someone for years. One honest conversation can change the direction of a life. One courageous choice can inspire countless others to stop hiding who they truly are. That is how lasting influence is created. Not through noise. Through consistency. As this journey comes to its final resting place, imagine your soulmate taking one last look toward the horizon. There is no fear in their eyes anymore. No unfinished battle inside their heart. Only gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson. Every delay. Every unexpected turn. Because without those moments, they would never have become the person capable of speaking their truth with confidence and compassion. And perhaps that is the quiet invitation this story leaves with you. Walk into tomorrow carrying hope instead of hurry. Choose understanding over assumption. Let your actions reflect your values more loudly than your worries. Trust that meaningful growth is happening even when progress feels invisible. The future is not waiting for someone perfect. It is waiting for someone willing to keep growing. So wherever your own story leads next, remember this gentle truth. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never tremble. They are the ones that continue choosing honesty, kindness, and purpose every single time they are given the chance. Thank you for being part of this journey. May your path be filled with quiet confidence, meaningful connections, and the wisdom to recognize beautiful moments while they are still unfolding. Because sometimes the greatest ending is simply the beginning of a life lived with an open heart. And that is a story worth carrying forward. A quiet whisper still remains, because every unforgettable journey leaves behind one final lesson that only reveals itself after everything else has become still. If you've come this far, this message is for you. Imagine your soulmate standing once more in the place where they had once spoken their heart without holding anything back. The room looked ordinary now. The excitement had faded. The conversations had long since moved on. Yet they smiled. Not because they wished to relive that moment, but because they no longer needed to. The truth had already done its work. It had changed them from the inside. That is the remarkable thing about authentic moments. They never belong only to the day they happen. They continue shaping tomorrow. Your soulmate realized that life was never asking them to become fearless. Life was inviting them to become genuine. There is a difference. Fear may visit every heart, but authenticity chooses to stay anyway. From that day forward, they noticed something beautiful. Every morning felt like an opportunity instead of an obligation. Every conversation became a chance to encourage someone. Every challenge became another lesson rather than another reason to give up. Without realizing it, they had become the kind of person they once hoped to meet. Perhaps that is the greatest hidden reward of every meaningful connection. It quietly transforms both people. Not into perfect versions of themselves, but into more compassionate ones. Take a slow breath and consider this. What if the greatest miracle is not finding someone who understands your heart? What if it is becoming someone who understands your own? Everything begins there. When peace grows within, it naturally reaches the people around you. When kindness becomes your habit, hope quietly follows. When honesty becomes your foundation, trust has room to grow. These are the invisible victories that last longer than applause. Your soulmate eventually stopped asking whether their words had changed everyone's opinion. That question no longer mattered. The only question worth carrying was this: did I remain true to who I really am? And the answer brought them complete peace. Because a sincere heart never loses by speaking with kindness. It simply continues creating light wherever it goes. As this journey gently settles into its final moments, remember what has echoed through every chapter. The confession was unforgettable. The courage was inspiring. The transformation was beautiful. But the true masterpiece was neither the words nor the crowd. It was the quiet decision to live with authenticity from that moment forward. That decision became the beginning of every meaningful chapter that followed. So as you continue writing your own story, let hope guide your vision. Let patience strengthen your spirit. Let gratitude shape your perspective. And whenever life invites you to choose between fear and sincerity, choose the path that allows your heart to remain honest. Years from now, that will be the choice you remember with gratitude. Because the brightest futures are rarely built through perfect moments. They are built through ordinary days filled with extraordinary character. And perhaps, somewhere beyond today's ending, another beautiful beginning is already waiting, one that will remind you that the strongest connections are not held together by chance, but by the quiet courage to keep growing, keep believing, and keep moving forward with an open heart. Until the next story. May your journey always lead you toward truth, purpose, and the quiet confidence that your finest chapters are still ahead. There is one final horizon to look toward, because every meaningful story leaves behind more than memories. It leaves behind a way of seeing the world that forever changes the person who experienced it. If your heart has walked through every chapter of this journey, then this last reflection belongs to you. Your soulmate eventually understood something that could never have been learned from words alone. The day they stood before everyone and spoke from the heart was not the greatest victory of their life. The greatest victory came afterward. When they continued living with the same honesty, even when no one was watching. That is where true character is revealed. Not during extraordinary moments, but during ordinary mornings, quiet afternoons, simple conversations, small decisions that no audience ever applauds. One morning, while watching the first light stretch across the horizon, they smiled to themselves. Not because every dream had already come true, but because they finally trusted the journey more than their fears. That quiet trust became their greatest strength. They no longer rushed tomorrow. They appreciated today. They no longer searched endlessly for certainty. They found peace in taking one sincere step at a time. And strangely enough, the more peaceful they became, the brighter the future appeared. Perhaps life has always worked this way. Not by rewarding those who hurry, but by gently guiding those who continue moving forward with patience, kindness, and courage. Pause here for one final thought. Imagine looking back on this season of your life years from now. What will you remember? The moments you worried? Or the moments you chose hope anyway? The answer may quietly shape every chapter that follows. Because hope is never simply a feeling. It is a decision. A decision made again and again, even when the outcome remains unseen. Your soulmate discovered that the heart grows strongest not when everything becomes easy, but when it continues believing that every challenge can become another lesson. That belief transformed the way they walked through life. Their confidence no longer depended on circumstances. Their joy no longer depended on perfection. Their peace no longer depended on outside approval. It came from within. That inner peace became something others could feel. Without speaking about it. Without trying to prove it. Authenticity naturally inspires. And inspiration quietly travels farther than anyone realizes. As this journey reaches its final breath, let its message stay with you. Speak with honesty. Lead with kindness. Protect your peace. Celebrate growth instead of perfection. Trust that every meaningful step you take today is preparing tomorrow in ways your eyes cannot yet fully see. Thank you for sharing this entire journey from the very first word to the very last. May your path always be filled with purpose. May your heart remain open to new possibilities. May your future be shaped by courage rather than hesitation. And whenever life places you at a crossroads, remember the lesson hidden inside every chapter of this story. The loudest declaration was never the one your soulmate made before everyone. The loudest declaration was the quiet promise they made to themselves afterward. To live truthfully. To love sincerely. To grow continually. And to never again allow fear to silence a heart that had finally discovered its own voice. That promise is where every extraordinary future truly begins. The story ends here. But your next chapter is only just beginning. A final light still shines beyond the ending. Because some stories are never meant to stop at the last page. They continue inside the choices we make after the words have faded. If you have stayed until this moment, then let this closing reflection become part of your own journey. Years from now, no one will remember every sentence your soulmate spoke that unforgettable day. The crowd will fade into memory. The place will change. The season will pass. But one thing will remain. The courage. Courage has a remarkable way of outliving the moment that created it. Your soulmate came to understand that the greatest gift they received was not the confidence to confess their feelings. It was the freedom that followed. Freedom from pretending. Freedom from endless second-guessing. Freedom from carrying emotions that were never meant to stay hidden forever. And once that freedom arrived, they discovered something even more beautiful. Life became lighter. Not because every challenge disappeared, but because they stopped carrying the unnecessary weight of fear. Imagine living that way. Imagine waking each morning knowing you no longer have to hide the truest parts of yourself. How peaceful would your heart become? How differently would you greet each new opportunity? Perhaps that quiet peace has been waiting for you all along. Perhaps it has never been far away. Sometimes all it takes is one honest decision to begin seeing the world through completely new eyes. Your soulmate realized that meaningful connections are never built on perfection. They are built on trust, on respect, on patience, on choosing understanding instead of assumption. Those invisible qualities became the strongest foundation they could have hoped for. And slowly, without even noticing it, they inspired others to live the same way. People felt safer around sincerity. Hope spread naturally. Conversations became deeper. Kindness became easier. Not because anyone forced it. Because authenticity invites authenticity. That may be the quiet miracle hidden inside every genuine connection. One truthful heart gives another heart permission to be truthful too. As this story gently reaches its final reflection, remember something that often goes unnoticed. The future is not waiting for a perfect version of you. It is waiting for the real you. The version that continues learning, continues growing, continues choosing compassion over fear. That version already exists. It becomes stronger every time you choose honesty over hesitation. Every time you replace doubt with purpose. Every time you believe that small acts of courage can shape extraordinary tomorrows. So walk forward without rushing. Celebrate progress instead of perfection. Treasure meaningful conversations. Protect your inner peace. And trust that every sincere step you take today is quietly becoming part of a future that is wiser, brighter, and more fulfilling than you can currently imagine. Because in the end, the most unforgettable love story was never about the moment your soulmate spoke before everyone. It was about the life both hearts chose to build after truth had finally set them free. And perhaps that same beautiful journey is only beginning for you now. One last whisper remains. Not to extend the story, but to leave you with a truth that grows stronger every time you remember it. Some endings are not conclusions. They are invitations to live differently. As time continued moving forward, your soulmate stopped thinking about that unforgettable day as the moment they confessed their love. Instead, they remembered it as the day they finally chose authenticity over fear. That simple choice became the foundation for everything that followed. They discovered that courage is not a destination you reach once. It is a quiet habit. A habit of speaking with kindness. A habit of listening with patience. A habit of showing up with sincerity, even when life feels uncertain. Every sunrise became a reminder that another opportunity had arrived. Another opportunity to encourage. To forgive. To grow. To become just a little wiser than yesterday. That is how remarkable lives are built. Not through one extraordinary event, but through thousands of ordinary moments filled with extraordinary intention. There came a day when someone asked your soulmate, if you could go back, would you change anything? They paused. Not because the answer was difficult. Because it deserved honesty. Finally, they smiled and replied, no. I needed every lesson. I needed every delay. I needed every unanswered question. Without them, I would never have become the person standing here today. Those words carried no bitterness. Only gratitude. And gratitude has a remarkable way of transforming memories into wisdom. Perhaps that is why this journey has felt different. It has never been about chasing impossible promises. It has been about discovering the quiet strength that already exists within every sincere heart. Take one final moment to reflect. Think about the people who have encouraged you. The conversations that changed your perspective. The challenges that quietly made you stronger. At the time, they may have seemed ordinary. Looking back, they became turning points. Life often works that way. Its greatest gifts rarely announce themselves in advance. They reveal their meaning only after we have walked through them. So continue your own story with confidence. Let curiosity remain stronger than fear. Let kindness remain stronger than pride. Let hope remain stronger than doubt. And whenever the road ahead seems uncertain, remember that meaningful journeys are not measured by how quickly they unfold. They are measured by who we become while walking them. As this chapter gently fades into the distance, carry one lasting truth with you. The unforgettable moment when your soulmate declared their feelings before everyone was never the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle was that one sincere act inspired a lifetime of honesty, compassion, growth, and purpose. That quiet transformation became their greatest legacy. May the same spirit of authenticity guide every chapter you write from this day forward. Because the most beautiful futures are not discovered by accident. They are created one truthful step at a time. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another meaningful beginning is already waiting for the person you are becoming.